Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Thrive Online. This is strange, but also fun. Just kind of want to take a moment to say good morning, say welcome. I'm Jordan.
I'm Lacey.
And we just want to welcome you guys this morning. Obviously, this is a crazy time. I'm sure you've all had a crazy week with just so many unknowns and uncertainties, with probably being home from work, probably figuring out how to homeschool your kids for the first time.
Good luck.
Figuring out how to go to the grocery store.
It's a zoo.
We're all talking about toilet paper more than we ever thought we would. But here we are, and so we just want to create, in the sense of chaos in the midst of unknown and uncertainty in our world, a place where we can be together, a place where we can bring hope and bring life and bring light. And so that's what this morning is, the chance to be the church. And the church isn't just a building. The church is us sitting at home on our couches and maybe in our PJs and grabbing a cup of coffee and being together and loving our neighbors well. And so that's what we're here to do this morning, and we're excited to welcome you into that space. If you've been with us the last few weeks, you know we've been going through a series called Unfulfilled. We've been talking about relationships and what does it look like to have a God-centered relationship. And so this morning, Andrew and Katie are going to take us away in a little bit talking about that and continuing week 2 of our Unfulfilled series. It's a chance we're going to go through 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and unpack what that looks like to focus our relationships on God and what God wants in those. So we'd love for you guys to join us for that. We're going to be hopping to that in a little bit. Just some updates of how to use this new platform as we're all figuring it out, and it's awkward and different, but obviously we'll be here on the screen kind of walking through the passage this morning. But you'll also see on the right of your screen there's a little chat room and a chat feature. You guys can hop in and just throw in some comments, interact throughout. Do a little shout out right now, why not? It's kind of fun. So love to see who's here this morning with us. So hop on that chat feature, use that throughout the message. There'll also be some notes in that little tab up on the right as well. You see there's a notes section if you want to follow along that way. Get some notes of the sermon, what we're talking about. Feel free to hop on that way as well. And then we'll kind of just have some chance throughout the message as well for some interaction, some chance to talk with each other if you're in a viewing party, some chance to maybe text a friend during those questions throughout the sermon, but also a chance to hop again in the little chat section and just interact with each other. So we want to be the church. We want to love each other through this. So in a little bit, we're going to hop into that, but in normal Thrive family fashion, we want to start with a question of the morning. So for our question of the morning, what do you got for us, Lace?
So my first thought of this was chaos and going grocery shopping. So the question of the day is, what is the one thing you hope to be at the grocery store? Not like necessities like eggs, milk, bread, but like that one like special treat that you hope is still there. So what is a treat you hope is still at the grocery store?
Love it. We'll throw that question up on the screen right now. We're going grocery shopping tomorrow, so hopefully that thing is there. We'll find out. We'll throw that question out. Take a little time if you're viewing by yourself. Hop again on that chat room or text a friend. If you're with a few people watching, feel free to talk about it. And then after that question wraps up, Andrew and Katie will come on and lead us into our message this morning. Unfulfilled Part 2, 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Love you guys. Hope everything's going well. Enjoy church this morning.
Bye!
Hey guys, Andrew here.
And Katie.
And we're excited that you're joining us as we continue our Unfulfilled series, A Better Way Forward for Relationships. We got started a couple weeks ago, and we're jumping back in today, finishing where we left off. We're going to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. And you may remember if you're with us a few weeks ago, we talked about how God made you to be a whole person. He cares about you. He cares about all of you. And when it comes to things like sex, relationships, dating, all that kind of good stuff, we're tempted to idolize, to make a god out of relationships, or we're tempted to demonize and become really negative and critical or feel like it's gross. But God cares about you. He wants you to flourish, and God's heart is for your good. And so Katie and I are going to be discussing a little bit out of 1 Corinthians 7 how to move past that into God's design for you to experience his gift.
Yeah, so now we're going to pick up where we left off in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 1. Now concerning the matters about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. That's something the Corinthians have written. Paul says, but because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. Believe it or not, in the Corinthian culture at this time, men had an unhealthy view of sex and women, and they actually were thinking, you know what, we shouldn't have sex with our wives, and that was a problem in the church.
Does that happen a lot today? Men say, please don't have sex with me to their wives?
It's very common in the church. So no matter what the time or space, I think that it's still relevant because we always can endeavor to have a healthier view of sexuality and the other gender and the people that we are in relationship with. So it might look different in different contexts, but this is going to relate to every story.
Yeah, and so we know from chapter 6 that we were talking about a couple weeks ago that these guys were struggling. They might have had shame and regrets and bad things they had done, and they're trying to find a way forward and say, okay, like, does God love me? What does a healthy relationship look like? What am I allowed to do, not allowed to do? And again, we have these extremes of idolizing sex and relationships or demonizing sex and relationships. And then ultimately, the way that the men were reacting in their shame and in their guilt was they were overreacting, and they were really demeaning women and demeaning their wives in trying to be godly. That they didn't quite catch what God's heart was for them. That there was a third way, that God wanted them to experience a gift. And more than a gift, that he wanted them to start to get their eyes off of themselves. That even in their reaction to their own mistakes, they were still blaming, they still were not finding God's good design. And so they really were supposed to value their wives, love their wives. And so we want to explore, how do relationships get to that point where you're for the other person's good, where you're giving a gift, where it's not about what you receive? Really the big question for today is there a better way than being self-focused, self-centered in relationships? Do our relationships always have to be about my feelings and how it affects me at the cost to another person? Now here in this section, it's talking specifically about the example of sex, but it applies to so many different things. Everyone, all of you, whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you're old, whether you're young, whatever kind of relationships you're in, we all have relational needs, relational desires. We're all related to other people, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And so we want to say, in every status, wherever you're at, how do we begin to have a healthy set of relationships that are based on giving rather than receiving?
And really the first point is that when relationships are a gift, they're built on mutual giving. And so in the passage here, we see in verse 3, the husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer, but then come together again so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. So Paul's reframing it here. Marriage is an act of generosity. And, it says, give to your wife and likewise the wife to the husband. This is about sex, but it applies to so many things. It's about, hey, what does this person want to watch on Netflix? And not just about what I want to watch on Netflix. Or creating meals that the other person enjoys. Maybe maybe I'll make their favorite tonight. Agreeing to a budget that reflects your mutual priorities, or considering the other person in how you schedule your time and your schedule and how you prioritize things in your life. Maybe it's getting to know that person's friends or family, asking about their hobbies, even if you don't necessarily understand their hobby. Like, I will never understand basketball to save my life, but I want to know what is going on in the world of basketball because it matters to Andrew. And he cares about all the things that I like to watch on TV. And so it's all about finding an interest in the other person and being generous and caring deeply about what matters to them.
Yeah, so Paul tells the believers in Corinth, give of yourself to meet the needs of the other person. And it's interesting, he goes so far as to say, actually, man, you don't have authority over your own body. Your wife has the authority over your body. And wife, you don't have authority over your body, but your husband does. Mm-hmm. Now, to be clear, this isn't saying, oh, somebody's got authority and they can demean or denigrate or abuse. Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. But what it's saying is that in a relationship, in a meaningful relationship, and especially in a marriage relationship, you're coming to a place where you're going to say, I'm going to give myself to you. Mm-hmm. I'm going to entrust myself to you. Mm-hmm. That I'm not worried about receiving a gift, that actually it's about giving a gift. It's about being a gift to another person. Right. We like to say that relationship in marriage especially is not take, it's give. Mm-hmm. How do I start to consider and give to another person? Ephesians 5 says it this way, right? Submit to one another, right? Mm-hmm. And it says, wives, submit to your husbands. And husbands, actually, you should die for your wives, like Christ did. And so in marriage, there's a sense of partnership. There's a sense of belonging. There's a sense of your interests and your concerns are more important than my own. That we're going to try to, as the text says here, find agreement and work together through prayer and through intimacy to say, hey, let's move forward as one. And really, this is a radical approach to think I can trust somebody enough to be always concerned about their benefit rather than my own.
Yeah. In Philippians, it talks about this. In Philippians 2, verse 3, it says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. And so what he's talking about here in Philippians, he's saying, like, let's be clear, this isn't just toward marriage. He's really rounding it out. This is about the Christian life. This is about living toward other people like Jesus lives toward them. It's about acting like people matter to God, and it's about treating people like God treats people.
And Jesus was so committed to our good that he lived the life in our place that we could never live. He died on the cross to take the death that we deserve. Mm-hmm. And he did all of that. He submitted himself to us for our good at his cost. And that's the kind of love he had towards us. And so that's the kind of love that happens in Christian relationships. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing about this kind of love. It's not always even.
Right.
It's not always a one-to-one. It's not transactional. It's not,
50-50.
Okay, yeah, you did it for me last week, and so I'm going to match you this week. I think about when I was in school finishing my master's, and we had a young child at home, and I was gone all the time. And I would have group members that would call me at all hours, and we were spending so much money on it, and we didn't even know if we were going to get that money back. And you had to kind of hold the fort for a while because you believed that ultimately that you could trust me as you were supporting me in that, right? And that I wasn't doing it to take advantage of you, but that you were strengthening me. And because you supported me in that way, right, it gave me the space and the trust and the confidence to know that maybe I should do that for you too, right?
You do. I think about when Andrew first felt like, wow, God's really calling us to move and to start a new church. I remember him saying, like, I feel like God's saying this to me, but we're not going to do it unless God's saying that to you. And not in like a hurry up here from God, or I really feel like we need to make this happen. But like, let's be still, and I want to hear what God's saying to you, and what you hear from God is really valuable. And I really appreciated that in that season, because yeah, it's so huge to hear from another person. Like, I value what you are hearing when you're listening to Jesus, and the Holy Spirit's moving in you. Even this week, one of us in a decision was saying, hey, I don't agree, but if you feel strongly, then let's do it that way, because that matters, and I care, and I trust what you have to say.
So whether it's your sex life, or whether it's figuring out your budget, or whether it's deciding to move or take a job, or whatever it may be to buy a house, I think God's design here is, how do you come to a place where you say, well, what is the person that I'm in partnership with? What do they need? What do they care about? What would it look like for me to serve? And when relationships are give, then everyone receives. God's design is mutual giving. Relationships become a gift when mutually you decide to serve and to give. And this applies to marriage, but it applies to friendship, to parents, to kids. What does it look like when I start to consider you more important even than myself? And so I want to give you a moment to reflect. What's one way somebody has been considerate of you? How has somebody demonstrated the love of Jesus towards you and considered you? Take a moment and think about that right now. So we talked about how to make relationships into a gift. And so the first one is what happens when in a relationship when two people are mutually giving. But here's the second thing. If you want to have a relationship be a gift in your life, well, you've got to embrace your unique gift. Paul continues in verse 6. He says, "Now as a concession, not a command, I say this. I wish that all were as I am. But each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another. To the unmarried and the widows, I say that it is good for them to remain single as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry. For it's better to marry than to burn with passion." I love this. Paul says, you know what? Personally, I actually really like being single. Paul says, I'm not looking to get tied down to somebody right now. I'm going places and doing things, and a permanent marriage relationship doesn't really fit into what God's asking me to do right now. And so he goes, to be honest, I'm not really sure that I would enjoy being married. But for some of you, you've got these deep longings, these urges, these passions, and they're sexual, they're relational, they're emotional, they're all these things. And so he says, look, if you want to be married, then get married.
Right.
If you don't want to be married, well, don't just get married because everybody else is doing it, right?
Yeah.
Like that is to enter into a relationship with somebody and say, man, like I'm gonna offer you, and I'm gonna be in this give relationship, but I'm not really invested. Honestly, that's not really fair to another person. And so part of what, and we're gonna get way into this more next week when we finish 1 Corinthians 7, but part of what Paul is saying here is you gotta have that honest relationship with God. What are you calling me to, God? What's the gift that you have for me? And if you are in a relationship, if you are married, if you are single, maybe you don't want to be in the state you're in, right? Whatever you're in, you want to be in the other one. How do you learn to find the gift within that, right? How do you come to a place where you say, you know what? Maybe this is difficult right now, but there's a gift in it.
Yeah.
You know? Maybe this isn't the relationships, it's not what I wanted to be, but there's a gift in it. I want to encourage you, take a moment right now and just reflect. What's the gift in it for me where I'm at right now?
And so third, healthy relationships are really about giving the gift of Jesus. That's what they're built on. And so back to the passage, verse 10, it says, "To the married I give this charge, not I, but the Lord. The wife should not separate from her husband, but if she does, she should remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband. And the husband should not divorce his wife. To the rest I say, I, not the Lord, that if a brother has a wife who is an unbeliever, and she consents to live with him, he should not divorce her. If any woman has a husband who is an unbeliever, and he consents to live with her, she should not divorce him." So kind of stay where you're at. For the unbelieving husband is made holy because of his wife, and the unbelieving wife is made holy because of her husband. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. But if the unbelieving partner separates, let it be so. In such cases, the brother or sister is not enslaved. God has called you to peace. For how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife? What he's saying is, it's valuable to stay married. It might be hard, but it's valuable. It's valuable even when the person has different values than you, maybe. It's valuable when it's challenging and it's a really hard patch for you guys right now. It's valuable when they don't want to be in church with you, maybe. It's valuable because the purpose of marriage is not to be on the same page. The purpose of marriage is to show someone what Jesus is like to them. And so we talked about, find out what they want to watch on Netflix, but it's not because Netflix is important, it's because the person's important. Finding out what they want for dinner and thinking about what they care about is not about dinner. Dinner does not last forever, but people last forever, and we invest in them. You promise, I'm going to treat you how God treats you.
And so marriage, if I totally agree with that, if I could give a definition, marriage is the agreement to be best friends for God for life. Mm-hmm. To say, I'm committing to be to you God's heart to you.
Yeah.
To say that I'm going to take responsibility, and I'm not going to be perfect, I'm going to mess up, mm-hmm. There's going to be times where I need you to forgive me, but to say my job description is to say to you, hey, I'm going to treat you and feel about you and love you in the best way that I can, how God treats you and feels about you and loves you. Right. And so Jesus is committed to you. He died for your sins. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give my life to you. Mm-hmm. You see, the call of the Christian life in every setting, single, married, young, old, whatever phase of life, whatever circumstance, is to be an image bearer of God. Mm-hmm. We were put on earth marked with majesty, with God's divine image, with a taste of heaven inside of us, in order to display God's character, his attributes. And so God is loving. And so when I'm in relationship with another person, I'm going to love you. And God is generous. So when I'm in relationship with another person, I'm going to be generous towards you. And God serves, so I'm supposed to serve. And God forgives, so I'm going to forgive. And so in a relationship, in marriage, you're saying, okay, I'm going to take responsibility for this one. Right. That come hell or high water, this person is going to know how God feels mm-hmm. about them. Mm-hmm. And so Paul says, you know what? God sticks with us in sickness and in health and for richer and for poor. And so if you're in a relationship, you can't just ghost, right? You can't just, we had a hard week and move on. Mm-hmm. Now in saying that, it's really interesting here. Paul says that sometimes there's direct command from God. You got to stick it out. There are other times where it's a little bit more messy. It's a little more complicated. Mm-hmm. And he says sometimes you're in a relationship with, hey, I'm trying to stick it out. I'm trying to make it work. The other person is unwilling or unable. It's unsafe, or they cheat on me and they just don't care, or I'm in danger, or my kids are in danger. And he says, of course. He says, you're not enslaved, mm-hmm. right? He says there's some times where you did everything you could, and so God grants you peace. And there's no judgment, and there's no shame in that.
Right.
But there's value and there's joy in having commitment in a relationship and having a sense of purpose. And he says there's value in showing your kids even, right, what it looks like to be faithful in a relationship, because that's how God's going to treat them, right? And so it's not about the letter of the law of checking the box of we made it through 60 years miserably and everybody hated it. But it's about a mentality of I want to be God's heart to you.
Right.
And would you be God's heart to me? The point of relationships is always evangelism. It's always discipleship. Mm-hmm. It's in some way, can you catch a glimpse, a taste, an experience of God's heart.
Mm-hmm.
And to the best of your ability, you've tried to be that to me. And to the best of my ability, I've tried to be that to you. And for you guys, Thrive Family, we've tried to be that, right? And church is a family. And we've tried to be a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a kid to you.
Mm-hmm.
And as you think about your marriage, as you think about your friendships, as you think about your small group and your service team, I'd like to encourage you to begin to ask the question, what would it look like to begin committing in relationships to say, hey, even when it's tough, I'm going to show you Jesus. Take a minute and think about that right now.
So when two people come together in marriage, they say, hey, I love you, I'm committed to you, I will serve you, I forgive you, I'm here for you no matter what. And it's really just a picture of what Jesus says to you. Married, single, doesn't matter where you're at in life. Jesus comes to you and says, hey, I love you, I'm committed to you, I will forgive you, I want to serve you, and I want to care for you forever. And so we just want to invite you into that, because that's ultimately the most important relationship that you could ever have and receive. And that's the most beautiful picture that can inspire us as we look to live fulfilling lives in relationship with others. And so we want to invite you into that, and we want to invite you to unleash God's power in your relationships, no matter what those are. So would you pray with me? God, we just thank you so much for the gift of relationship, and that ultimately you've offered your very self to be in relationship with us. God, we thank you that you have paid the ultimate sacrifice. You've given, you've cared more about us than you did yourself. God, we want to be, first we want to sit in that. We want to live in light of that. And then we want to offer that to others. But we can only offer that to others as we depend on your Spirit, and as we truly let that sink into our souls, that you care, you see us, you know us, and that you love us deeply. God, would you do that for the Thrive family this week? Would you do that for every single one of us? That you would remind us of your love, and that you would help us to walk in it toward others this week. In your name, amen.
Amen.
We love you, Thrive family. We'll see you soon.
Well, I hope that was encouraging for everybody. You know, it's just so good to be reminded that in the midst of relationships, that Jesus is truly the only thing that's going to fulfill us. And following his call and realizing that his love is greater than any relationship in our life is encouraging, I think, especially in this season as we're wrestling through what our lives look like in these days ahead. So yeah, hold on to that. Hopefully that can be something you can wrestle through this week. As we wrap up our time together, just a few quick announcements and things to be thinking about.
So as by now you guys have gotten an email from us saying, just kind of explaining where we're at with the church and how we're moving forward. And so if you get that, get a chance to read it. And then at the end of it, we have a survey just to kind of see how we can better love you and support you and encourage you in this time. So please fill it out. There's also ways that you can help other Thrive people as well. So it won't take very long. Just fill it out, and we'd be so happy just to see how we could better love and support you guys in this time.
And if you haven't done that yet, there's a little link in the notes tab on this feed, so feel free to click on that and just fill it out right now. Take a little moment. We'd love, like I said, to be the church and to learn how to love and support each other, support our neighbors, and so I think that's a good way to just get some information about that. There's also a bunch of information up on our website, thrivelachurch.com. If there's more ways you want to help out or get involved or get other people connected in this time, there's some good resources on that site that we've uploaded and updated. So check that out. We'd love, like I said, to be a resource in this time. And we'll see you guys all next Sunday at 10 a.m. We'll be back on here for church together virtually as we figure out this season. As always, we're praying for everyone. We love you guys. Let us know how we can support you. If you need to contact people for any reason, all of our contact information is Pastors at Thrive or on that notes section as well. So let's be in this together. Let's love each other well. We're praying for you guys. So
Hope to see you next week.
see everyone. Have a good week.
Bye.